Hello, everybody. I'm Brooks Rayford, CEO of NC Tech, and welcome to this briefing on the release of our quarterly leadership poll. As many of you know, for the past few years, we've conducted a quarterly poll that asks some consistent questions about general business sentiment. Sometimes we include a timely question, and this most recent poll had a question about inflation risk in 2026. We asked that question last quarter as well, so we'll be talking a little bit about any shifts that occurred in sentiment on that question from last quarter to this one. The first quarterly poll of 2026 was conducted from January 21st to 23rd, and we're releasing the results today. We'll be posting the results and this briefing on our website later today at nctech.org/pulse. We polled about 300 people made up of our board of directors, our board of advisors, tech CEOs in North Carolina, and leaders of large tech hubs or sites in North Carolina whose companies are not headquartered here but have large sites here. The poll had a 38% response rate, which is pretty typical for our polls. Our sponsoring partner from the inception of these polls has been the Stearns Financial Group. Their founder, Dennis Stearns, serves on the NC Tech Board of Advisors, and he joins me again here today to offer some of his observations from the latest poll. So welcome, Dennis, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Brooks. Happy New Year and welcome, everyone.
So I'll walk through the results and highlight some areas where we've seen some shifts in sentiment or activities in the last quarterly poll, and my colleague Alex will be moving us through the slides. So Alex, you can take us to the first one. The first few questions are always demographic in nature, just so you get a sense of who took the poll. We ask about the size of company, at least North Carolina presence. You can see the distribution here. And as is typical with these respondents, we lean a little larger in the respondent in terms of the respondent's company size based on the demographics of who takes the poll, but you can see the distribution here. Next. About two-thirds of our respondents have companies that are headquartered in North Carolina. That actually mimics our membership. About two-thirds to a little more than that are headquartered in North Carolina. And then here's the breakdown of the person's role within the company. We obviously lean heavily C-suite and IT. Now we get into some of the sentiment questions. The first one is, how do you perceive the past quarter has been for North Carolina's technology sector broadly? Not your own company, that's the next question, but in general, what's your perception of the past quarter? And you'll see here the breakdown. The parentheses number below each of these percentages tells you how many points up or down this is from the most recent poll. And the good news is that the sentiment has shifted positively. We, for the first time since doing this poll, 0% felt that the past quarter was terrible for the sector. It's always a low number, but 0 is good. Slightly disappointing, 10%, just under 10%, which is a tick down from last quarter. Okay is 37%, which is down several ticks from recent quarters. Good is 48%, which is up several ticks from recent quarters. And great is 5%, which is on par with where it's been. So there's some shift from okay to good. And that's encouraging to see. I'll do this next slide, then Dennis, I'll get your take on it. This is asking about your own organization. And here, again, a minimal number saying terrible for their own, slightly disappointing, 11, kind of on par with what they thought about the sector. Okay, 31, right on par with, a little bit lower than people felt about the sector. Good is 40, and great is 17. So people are more optimistic or more positive about their own organization than they are about the sector. We tend to see that, Dennis. People maybe hear the news, they see news of layoffs, and maybe think the sector is having some headwinds, but their own organization, which they have better knowledge of, they feel better about. Are you seeing that trend continue as well?
We are, and we have visibility into over 700 private companies, and so that trend does continue. I think the overwhelming question, which we'll get into in the pros and cons in a minute, has been with all these hundreds of billions of dollars being invested in AI specifically, and it will be over 500 billion. I mean, it's a huge number in 2026 alone. Where will it trickle down? Trickle down economics to some of our tech companies that may not be in the, right in the path of AI, but are kind of second or third derivative from that. So I think that'll be something interesting to keep an eye on going forward.
Indeed, indeed. All right, the next slide actually looks forward, and we ask people, you expect that over the next quarter, our business will what? And so only just under 2% said decline. You'll see that that's down a good bit from the last quarterly poll, so that's good. Stay the same, 31%, which is down a bit from the previous quarter, but grow is 67%. That's up almost 10 points. So the sentiment shifted upward across the board here, much of it moving into the growth prediction. Dennis, what are you hearing from the clients that you deal with?
Yeah, this is pretty consistent. A lot of the companies are in a grow baby grow frame of mind.
And then on that note, we'll move to the next slide where we ask about headcount. Some of you who listened to these briefings before know that we slightly changed the question a few quarters ago to talk about net impact, really, not so much. You could be hiring and laying off at the same time, and so it gets confusing if you say, "Are you hiring? Are you laying off?" So overall, are you reducing headcount, maintaining your headcount, or increasing it? You'll see that reducing headcount just under 10%. That's down a bit from the last quarter. Maintaining headcount is 44%. That's down notably from last quarter, and all of that went to increasing headcount, which is up almost 8 points from last quarter. And this may be at odds with what the news headlines seem to imply as we hear about layoffs from some of the larger employers. But then again, most people aren't employed by large employers. Most people are employed by smaller and mid-sized employers. And Dennis, you deal with a lot of those.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this period we've been in where we haven't seen much hiring, but we haven't seen much firing,
Mhm.
writ large is continuing. But again, I think this is a North Carolina phenomenon a little bit, but also smaller companies that are getting into the growth phase. And so good for North Carolina.
Yeah, good for that. Okay, next slide is going to be our a question that we sometimes insert here, a one-off. This is sort of a one-off. It's a repeat of last quarter's timely question, and that is, are you concerned about a possible return of inflation in 2026 and impacting your business costs? Unsure is almost 15%. Yes is 53%. No is 33%. Now that can, in comparison to that, last quarter, unsure was higher, 21%. Yes was a bit higher, 56%, and no was only 24%. So that tells me that people have gotten off their unsure bench fence and moved into the no category. So there seems to be a increasing feeling, although it's still a minority, that inflation will not be a major problem this year. Still a majority feels yes, but there's a larger portion that say no than was the case last time. Dennis, what are you saying? You're in the finance world, so you probably have your finger on the pulse of this one.
Yeah, well, a couple different perspectives. One is that generally we are not as concerned about inflation as we are maybe 10 other items for 2026. Towards the end of the year, we may start seeing some nudges up. But again, from a company point of view, which is hopefully what folks are answering this question from, it's the inputs to whatever their business is doing. It's not what the price of bacon is at the grocery store. And so that's going to be something interesting to keep an eye on as the year progresses. But one of our large entities that we do a lot of work with around the country, they're the largest housing entity in the country, Blackstone. Was on a briefing here recently with them, and they said shelter inflation, which is 1/3 of the consumer price index, looks like it will be less of a problem in
Hmm.
2026 than the lagging government income indicators would say. So again, very specific to a company. The general number may not be a problem, but if you've got supply chain snarls in your particular world, you may see some spot inflation.
So you were saying housing in general is a large component of inflation, but they're thinking it may not be as significant this year, therefore will impact the overall number.
Yeah, again, Blackstone is in both the rental side as well as some of the other sides of
Hmm.
the real estate business, and they see it being, potentially quarter, 0.5% less shelter inflation,
Hmm.
which is a third of the CPI. So, that doesn't mean that we couldn't have food take off again, but keep in mind this is an election year.
Yeah.
And so the government's going to try to do everything they can to keep a lid on some of the other factors, at least through November.
Right. Right. Thank you. Okay, we can move on. The last two questions that we ask are open-ended. And so you see here just sort of a visual of what are you most optimistic about over the coming 12 months. And the next slide will show what concerns people. So in the terms of optimism, economic momentum, recession resilience, we just talked about inflation there a little bit, stabilization of interest rates, North Carolina's business climate, AI growth and innovation, that's a double-edged sword. Obviously, that makes a lot of people excited and a lot of people nervous. So it shows up on both slides along with some others. If you move to the next slide, Alex, we'll see the things that concern people. Stagflation, inflation, geopolitical tensions is a big one. Tariffs and trade policy, which seems to bounce around. So I think that the uncertainty around that is probably what's concerning, not so much the underlying issue even. Um, any comments here on what you're hearing from the people you talk to in terms of what they're optimistic about or what they're concerned about?
Yeah, these are pretty consistent, maybe with the exception of stagflation, which was a concern and now maybe is getting a little bit in our rearview mirror, but we'll see.
Hmm.
And the AI growth and innovation, which was the number one biggie on the what you're optimistic about. Again, there's a lot of subtext to that. The question is, will this $500 billion plus being spent this year on that provide an appropriate rate of return to those companies that are spending it? Massive debate going on about that. But we're in the camp of this is a rational bubble. And you might say, well, what's a rational bubble? Well, a rational bubble is that with all this money being spent and the really smart people working on a lot of good projects, there will be a lot of positive things coming out of it, productivity, healthcare, you name it, downstream. The bubble piece is that not everybody can be a winner. And the circular CapEx spending is a concern. The fact that many of these big outfits, with NVIDIA right at the center, are spending with each other and booking at revenues and profits. Well, when was the last time we saw that? Well, 2007, right before the Great Recession, and it was in financial companies. Now, our judgment right now is this is not 2007, yay, and that it's not nearly as dangerous on this circular CapEx spending, but it is a danger, and Oracle is in that mix, and they were celebrating, and then they were doing a dirge. They collapsed. So we're probably going to see more of that, where we see some celebrations and parties, and then we're going to see some deflation as maybe things are not coming through quite on the timeline everybody hoped. And it's just going to be a whole series of that in the next few years.
I think that brings us to the end of the slides that have content on them. This slide shows you where you can find the slide deck as well as this recording once we're through. Thanks again, Dennis, to you and the Stearns Financial Group for sponsoring this polling series. And a reminder that nctech.org/pulse is where you'll find all this material later today. For now, thanks for viewing, and we'll see you next time.